2 years ago, I had a baby for 2 men. It was something I'd wanted to do since my early 20s, when I saw my friends Mark and Eric have 2 daughters with a surrogate named Wen. They were the first gay family I knew, and I was so touched by what she made possible for them, and by seeing what an important part of their family she became. 10 years later, when my partner Julia and I wanted to have kids, we asked Mark and Eric if they would help us. We loved the idea of our kids knowing the other half of their biology, and of them having a bigger sense of family around them. And since our kids, Karsten and Solveig, were born, they've known Mark and Eric as their dads. When our youngest was about 6 months old, Julie and I knew that we didn't want to have more kids. And I remember telling her how sad I was that I wasn't going to be pregnant again. And she said, "Liv, you realize what you just said? We don't want to have more kids, and you're sad you're not going to be pregnant again. We're actually in the perfect position to help another couple have a baby." And we knew who we wanted to talk to. Our friends Wessel and Hune were eager to have a child. Julie had done international LGBTQ human rights work with Wessel. As co-presidents of an international organization, they'd worked together for 10 years across 3 continents. And while Wessel and Hune lived in Amsterdam, we'd all gotten close during that time. Once we started talking about the possibility of having a baby, we realized quickly that this was something all of us wanted to try. As I started talking to my friends about this, I realized that they had questions I didn't exactly know how to answer. Are you sure you can do this? Can you give your baby away? Won't it be hard? And the truth was, I didn't know if I could do this. I hadn't done it before. And I was sure that it would be hard, but I didn't know exactly in what ways. But our family had come to us through a similar gift, and it was something that I wanted to try. There are moments in our lives when we try something we haven't tried before. It takes a lot of trust to step towards something without being entirely sure where it will go or how it will land. And this was one of those times. This was not a typical paid surrogacy. We would use my eggs, and while Wessel and Hune would be the baby's parents, he would know me and Julie as his moms, and we would always be a part of his family. We started talking to lawyers who worked with gay families to see if they could help us ensure that Wessel and Hune would have custody of the baby and would be able to take him home to Europe after he was born. We talked to lawyer after lawyer after lawyer, and all of them told us no. What you represent to each other, they said, is a risk. You're considered opposing parties in a court of law, and what you need to do is protect yourselves from each other. I finally called a gay family law practice for the 2nd time and asked if I could try to explain again. We trust each other. We're working together. We want the same thing. What we need is to ensure that both fathers have custody of their baby. And what she told me is that this is not typically what family law did. Family courts are typically used to split families apart. And she told me that later, once she had seen us together and she had heard us talking about what we wanted and realized we were describing it in the same ways, that she was going to help us. And what she suggested is that we create a 3-way custody agreement in which both fathers and I would share custody, and eventually I could step back, leaving them as his guardians. I realized that we don't really have models for family structures that fall outside of what we know. And while risk in a legal context was considered something to protect ourselves against, I had started feeling like it was the risk that was moving us towards something so powerful. So, through the wonders of modern fertility care, before long, I was pregnant. And this is when it got real. I was over 40. I was very excited to be pregnant, but my partner and I both had demanding jobs. We had a 2- and a 4-year-old at home. I was pregnant with a baby that we weren't going to raise, and I was tired. Meanwhile, Wessel and Hune were back in Amsterdam, binge-watching 7 seasons of The Good Wife. Not being pregnant, not even living with someone pregnant. So while they were enjoying sushi and trips to Paris, I was at home avoiding soft cheeses. And lunch meat, not drinking, and eating 80 grams of protein a day at the request of my midwives, mostly in the form of cottage cheese, because who in the hell can eat 80 grams of protein a day? And I'm just gonna say, if anyone ever tells you or another pregnant person you know to eat 80 grams of protein a day, I would say go maybe like 65, 70, because at 80 grams, this baby ended up being almost 10 pounds. And I just say, given the choice, I would probably not choose to birth another almost 10-pound baby. Speaking of being large, towards the end of our pregnancy, Julie took a picture of me standing sideways, proudly holding my pregnant belly, and texted it to Wessel and Hune. And Hune wrote back, "Wow, she's huge." Is that normal? At which point, I started Googling pictures of women carrying multiples to show him just how large a pregnant belly could get. And Julie was frantically texting back saying, "She's doing great, she's so strong. By the way, emotions are running high here." And Hune, in a valiant effort to redeem himself, said, "Oh, it's just because her arms and legs are so thin that her belly looks big. I get tired carrying my backpack to work some days, and she's doing this for 9 months. Respect!" To be fair, they took great care of us from far away while I was pregnant. They sent cards and flowers and a beautiful necklace for Mother's Day. They came and stayed with us at several points throughout the pregnancy, going to ultrasound appointments and taking birthing classes. They bought bins to organize the disaster area that our children's playroom had become because we were too tired to put things away and started just throwing toys in there. They picked our kids up from school. They dyed Easter eggs with us. They made meals for us. And through all of this, we got closer. Just before Junie's due date, they came to stay with us. It was 4th of July. We've already established that I was big. It was hot. And I was a little concerned at this point that I was so over being pregnant that while everyone else had been worrying that my maternal instincts would be so strong that I wouldn't be able to give the baby away, that by the time he actually got here, I might be more like, "Oh, hello, here's your baby, bye." And so we waited for 7 days after his due date, eating every form of spicy curry, spicy noodles, spicy chocolate, spicy kimchi, until early on the morning of July 16th, when he finally came. His name was Junie, and I loved him more than I thought I would. They stayed with us for 2 beautiful weeks after he was born, staying at a borrowed house just a few blocks away. We spent most of our days together, going to newborn doctor's appointments and getting his birth certificate, me pumping breast milk and our kids helping to feed him and take him on walks. And when it was time for them to go home, we were all sad. But this is what we had planned. And I was excited to come back to my own family. And Wessel and Hyun were amazing fathers. And I thought it was fine. And then I was driving home from work one day, and I missed the exit to my house. I started forgetting the names of people that I'd met not that long ago. One day at work, I was in the parking garage. I was parked next to a concrete pillar. And I turned and looked right at it, and then turned my car and drove right into it. I was so worried that I started reading about early onset Alzheimer's online. Later that fall, about 12 weeks after Junie left, I went to a conference for work in California. And I was having dinner with my friend Stacy, an educational psychologist, and she asked me how I was doing. And I knew that she was asking about Junie. I told her that I was fine. But I started describing how worried I was about all of the things that I'd been losing and forgetting. And she looked at me and said, "Liv, that's grief. And the thing about grief is it will wait for you." And I realized that what she said was true. And in that moment, what I felt was relief. Because I'd been so focused on knowing that Junie was what I had wanted, that I hadn't given space for letting myself experience the pain of letting him go. And if I wanted to experience the joy of having him in my life, that was something I needed to do. And in this process of having and letting go is the fullness of life. And that is what we had wanted from the beginning. Because when we take the risk of trying something without knowing exactly where it will go, and we leave space for the joy and the pain, is when we experience our lives most fully. Not only in what we have, but in what we let go. Thank you.
I think we should take this opportunity to meet this extraordinary family. Wessel and Hyun, Julie, and he's awake from his nap, Junie.
Thank you.